Welcome, everyone. My name is Esteban Benitez, and I will be your designated instructor for this session called To Learn and Retrieve. To ensure that this session goes smoothly and out of respect to the rest of the participants, please silence your mobile. If you should have an emergency and need to take a call, please do so in the hallway. Thank you, and let's begin. Let us begin this workshop by going over the learning objectives. I like to think of these as a recipe to baking an awesome cake. And who doesn't like cake? So at the top of our list, we have how students learn. It is important we understand this process in order to create effective content. Next on our list are the various learning impediments. These are roadblocks that suppress students from having a more effective learning experience. Having the ability to recognize various learning impediments allows us as instructors to create much more rich teaching material. Once we have established an understanding of the kind of barriers there are, we can proceed to the next step. We are identifying the three methods of active and practical learning. We all need to know how learning works to develop teaching content that tackles these essential areas. By doing so, you can produce much more rich content for active learning. We'll continue on to understand what kind of strategies can be developed that allow students to learn and be able to retrieve that information at a later time. The next point is known as a more common problem among students: poor learning habits. Most students develop bad learning habits due to the way we, as instructors, guide them. It can be prevented if we understand how to tackle those problems before they begin. So now we are on our last and probably the most critical point: constructing a robust teaching plan that will address all of the previous points as one. It all begins here. So in a sense, you start from the bottom and dissect each area to fully understand how to create content that is clear, robust, and geared towards a more effective learning experience for students. To be a more effective instructor, we must first understand the way learning works and some of the learning impediments that exist. In the next few slides, we will look into these impediments to develop an understanding of what they are and how they affect the way students learn. As students begin their journey in education, they get exposed to many different teaching styles. Some teaching styles are more complicated than others, and some are more or less organized. Based on these teaching styles, students begin to develop a structure to how they study, and which type of studying works best. At some point, students start to build habits that resemble the teaching styles they have been exposed to. Psychologists have been able to look deep into this phenomenon in order to understand why students develop these habits. Through various scientific studies and on-location testing, psychologists have been able to determine that students develop these habits based on the positive results they acquire. Students who practice on a massive level tend to see immediate results. An excellent example of this mass practice is called cramming. Cramming is the most common studying habit students turn to when they know they have a test the following day. The night before testing, students pack as much information as possible to ensure they get a higher test score. The way students see it, if it worked before, it is more likely to work again. But this kind of studying is useless in the long run. 9 times out of 10, students lose that information within weeks. Studies show evidence that students who force data tend to retain less information in the long-term memory. It creates a problem for the student if he or she ever needs to recall that information. A solution to this problem relies on students developing different types of study habits, some of which are known as interleaving and space practice. Space practice can seem dull and boring with no immediate results. It can create frustration among the student, but can be beneficial in the long run. In the end, it's not about how much you cram, but how much you can retain. Unfortunately, there are very many learning impediments surrounding students on a daily basis. In the following slides, We will go over some of those learning impediments to help you understand them. This can help you, as an instructor, mentor your students to develop more effective learning habits. Students have a comfort zone, which they sometimes never want to let go. These can cause students to develop distortions and illusions to what they think they know and what they really know. Students do not develop these bad habits on their own, so most likely they have been taught. We can help students change this by coaching them and evaluating their learning with frequency. Students who get exposed to bad teaching habits tend to accept them without knowing the negative impact they carry. Students get used to thinking that just because it was taught, it must be right. This can create an illusion within the student and prevents them from identifying areas that need to be improved. As human beings, our brain has a limit to how much information it can hold. As we are introduced to new information, our brain deletes old data that is considered to be unneeded or old. If we do not keep important information fresh and updated, it can be lost forever. Human beings are born with 3 analytical mechanisms. These mechanisms are called encoding, consolidation, and retrieval. They work together to help develop long-term results. In the following slides, we will explore them and build an understanding of how they work individually and collectively. Encoding is the ability to convert information in a specific language that a receptor can understand. The information received can be in different forms such as visual, sensory, or auditory. As instructors, we must create content that tackle all of these areas to have more effective results. I know we are all used to the old-fashioned lectures, but these only tackle one area, the auditory. This means that students are only encoding information through one area. If we apply pictures to the lecture, we are now adding a second reinforcement. Finally, if we include games or interactive elements, we are tackling all 3 areas, allowing students to encode more information via different regions. Assuming we tackled all the students' perceptive areas, the next step is consolidating that information for later retrieval. It is at this point that the mind filters every bit of code to determine what is useful and what is not. Consolidation is what strengthens the student's learning by adding on to what they already know. We can further create a stronger compression by reintroducing the content later on through the week. Allowing information stored in the short-term memory move more effectively to the long term. Allowing the information received to be accessible when it is needed. The last part of this vital journey is retrieval. It is at this point that the quality of the information retained will benefit the student. The knowledge obtained by each student can now be applied to measurable elements such as testing. Testing forces a student to make an effortful attempt to recall the information, thus leaving a positive impact on every student. Now that we have covered substantial areas of how students learn and some of the learning impediments, it is now time to create effective learning content. The following slide will help you as an instructor to develop a strategic plan geared towards better studying habits for students. As instructors, it is always beneficial to implement a low-stake test. This can help the student and the instructor understand which areas need to be improved. This concept of dynamic testing derives from a collaboration between 2 well-known psychologists, Robert Sternberg and Elena Grigorenko. When we align content that requires students to elaborate on the matter, we create connections. This is considered to be a form of learning reinforcement. Elaboration can also help students recall information much faster and accurately. When asking specific questions to a particular topic, ask the student to give real-life examples relevant to the problem. This will force the student to think hard and retrieve information and establish a connection to the new information. Games that are aligned with various topics relevant to the content instructed can help students recall information. Develop games that require students to match definitions with terminology, similar to the game called Match. If you remember the game, it involves flipping a card and trying to figure out where the other matching image is located. So before we end this workshop, let's summarize what we went over. We need to take the time to understand and analyze how students learn. We can prevent lousy study practice by assessing what students don't know to enforce that area and prevent future distortion. It is up to us as instructors to develop content that can help students evolve and succeed, but most importantly, help them develop good learning habits.